Defendant not guilty or guilty? Not guilty. So say you, Mr. Foreman? Yeah. So say you all?
Andrew, it was amazing. I mean, the energy.
There was a lot of reasonable doubt, at least to where we didn't want to convict her.
There is a level of incompetence by a prosecutor.
The Karen Reed verdict is in. It came in, and helping me break it all down for you in this episode is Attorney Mark Bederow. I have attorney Yolie Medina from California. And frankly, one of my favorite YouTubers is joining us. She makes us think, but she makes us laugh. Alexasrewm, welcome all. And also in this episode, what are the most outrageous moments in the last weeks of the Karen Reed trial? I guess I should start out by formally welcoming everyone. Mark, you've been a busy guy. Thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here. How are you?
And I'm good. Yolie, how's everything out in California?
It's okay. Settling down.
Okay. And Alexis, you are not, you start your episodes by saying, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a medical person. I just have an opinion. And boy, do you. So before we get into it, who wants to start with their initial reactions when the verdict came down in the Karen Reed case?
I mean, I'll go. I was, like a lot of people, I was crying because I had been very invested in this case for about a year now. Mainly started with Proctor's testimony last year. And I think as a woman too, I just felt a lot for Karen personally, even not knowing her from Adam. So for me, it was just, it felt like a big weight had lifted off of my shoulder and I could finally kind of believe in the justice system again. So I was just completely elated.
Yolie.
I wasn't surprised by the verdict. I just didn't see it. I never saw it. And Andrew, you and I did a show when I was first introduced to this case because I hardly knew anything about it. And we talked about it and we did a question and answer. Remember that show where you were educating me on the case and I was asking you questions? I sure do. And I just, I was like, Andrew, if what you're telling me is true, I don't see it. I never saw it. Never.
Mark, your thoughts?
No, I think it was bound to end this way, inevitably, not to misquote a common word used by the prosecutor, but this is a case that never should have been indicted, let alone tried twice, let alone once. So I think this was always going to be the result, no matter how long it took. So I'm not surprised in the least bit. This case was a textbook case of tunnel vision, just awful police conduct, terrible use of prosecutorial discretion, and just a suffocating amount of reasonable doubt. When you put those all together, that's a case that should not be indicted and tried, full stop.
Well, it appears that the jurors, and we're going to talk about the jurors in just a minute, but first, Mark, one of your favorite sayings from talking to you before is, let's not bury the lead. So let's not bury the lead and let's take a look at the verdict coming in.
Mr. Foreman, on docket number 2282 CR 117001, murder in the second degree, what say you? Is the defendant at the bar guilty or not guilty? Not guilty. So say you, Mr. Foreman? So say you? No. Do you agree? Yes. Do all of you agree? Yes. Thank you. 002, what say you? Is the defendant at the bar not guilty or guilty? Not guilty. Is not guilty or guilty of that charge or any lesser included charge? Thank you. Specifically, number 5, operating under the influence of liquor by operating a motor vehicle with a blood alcohol level of 0.08 or greater. Correct? Yes. So say you, Mr. Foreman? Guilty. So say you all? Yes. 003, what say you? Is the defendant at the bar leaving the scene after accident resulting in death? Is the defendant not guilty or guilty? Not guilty. So say you, Mr. Foreman? Yes. So say you all?
Wow, the crowd was so loud outside you could hear them inside the building.
That's pretty wild. Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say that was just so crazy that it would pick up that feed so clearly. But it just felt like I felt like cheering myself too.
We're going to talk to someone that was in that crowd in a few moments. But Mark, what were your feelings when that came down?
I mean, I look at the lawyers and I see the way the tension, and I get it. I mean, everybody who tries cases knows when you're awaiting a verdict, it's just brutal. It's the really only part of the trial that the lawyers are going to stress out, get nervous. You have no control over what's going to happen at that point. And to see the tension move into pure elation and relief is you love to see that, especially in a case like this where these people are on the right side. And if you do this for a living and you get a client who you actually believe in, you believe they're innocent, and you have to fight the awesome power of the state again and again at such a great disadvantage, between the conduct of the prosecution, some would say the rulings of the court, and to just fight it all and walk out there a winner. It's beautiful to see.
And the thing that we don't know, people call going to trial often a roll of the dice. We all wonder, what are those jurors thinking? Well, at least two of them have come out, and here is juror Jason saying it all came down to reasonable doubt.
So I think for the jurors, there's a mix of some people think that she was definitely innocent, and the other people, there was a lot of reasonable doubt, at least to where we didn't want to convict her.
And then there was a juror by the name of Paula Prado, who's actually an attorney, but not in the United States, in Brazil. And she was asked a question that opened my eyes. And the question was there any one aha moment for you?
The Commonwealth witness judge, I forgot his name, Judge Welcher.
Yeah, Derek.
Dr. Welcher.
Dr. Welcher.
Yeah. So Dr. Welcher, car accident reconstruction, seemed a little off, and wow, they couldn't even prove that. So that moment was maybe an aha moment. Mm-hmm. And when ARCA came in and gave us such a good accident reconstruction to us, made sense.
Yeah, that expert, that I call him the Blue Man expert, he needs to go join the Blue Man group in Vegas. I was not impressed with him at all. I just couldn't even focus on what he was saying because of the blue paint. And it was just, I would not put somebody like that on the stand ever. And I would also never put somebody on the stand who lied on their CV and said they had a bachelor's degree when they did not.
Well, that would have been his partner, Shanon Burgess, who has been working on his bachelor's degree since 2007. Alexis, your thoughts on that one?
I mean, I just want to know what happened to all the blue paint after that. Did they get to reuse it? Did they get to resell it? I know that they're trying to sell the SUV that they got from the state. So, I mean, it was just laugh out loud funny for me. And again, I'm not a scientist. I didn't get a bachelor's degree myself, so I'm no one to judge in regards to that. But, as any normal lay person can look at that and just say, is this reality or is this an SNL sketch? It was just absolutely ridiculous. And I thought it was creepy, borderline creepy, how he dressed up as a murder victim. And just the level of distaste, and I don't know, it completely rubbed me the wrong way. I couldn't take it seriously. The fact that he wasn't even getting hit 24 miles in reverse either. It's like you're not even using the correct variables to test this experiment.
Mark, a lot of times people talk about cases like this as coming down to a battle of the experts. Do you think that's what it was? And do you think it was just, as the second juror said, that the Latitude experts just weren't believable?
No, this wasn't a battle.
Aperture experts weren't believable.
This wasn't a battle of experts. This was an annihilation. I mean, this was a massacre of experts. There ought to be an arrest warrant out for Judge Welcher for grand larceny, for fleecing the taxpayers of almost $500,000 to cover himself in finger paint while cosplaying as John O'Keefe. they're not experts. There's no science. And, his data was, the significant part of his data was reliant upon someone else who worked for his firm, it's not that he was someone who didn't graduate college in 17 years, which is in some ways disturbing enough, but not that disturbing. The more disturbing part is he committed egregious and systemic, pervasive academic fraud, and there's no accident here. He went from graduating to not graduating to graduating in 2018 to 2022 to 2024, and none of that was absurd enough. He ended up purporting to have a degree from an institution where there's no such degree that exists. So this speaks poorly of them, but most primarily, it speaks poorly of Hank Brennan. He hired these people, okay? He was brought in at, what's going to amount to close to $1 million of taxpayer money, knowing what the ARCA people were going to say, knowing that the state police in the first trial had no scientific explanation for this. And they're just spending taxpayer money like drunken sailors to bring in this firm who fingerprints, does no science, and relies on academic cheats. It's just an absolute disgrace.
It is a disgrace, but as someone who, like many other Massachusetts residents, fled just to the southern tip of New Hampshire, I don't think the Massachusetts taxpayers really care. Many times there have been efforts to control taxes in Massachusetts. One was many years ago, Prop 2.5 to limit budget increase. And many people vilified Barbara Anderson and the others who were behind that. They just vilified her and made it seem like she was some kind of a monster. And I don't think the taxpayers of Massachusetts care. And it's a sad commentary, but I think you're right. They stole a lot of money for this case. And Yoli, what did you think that it seems like Adam Lally, as vilified as he was, seems like he tried a better case than Hank Brennan did. Do you agree?
I only saw parts of the first trial, but based on what I did see, I agree with you, Andrew. I think Adam Lally, although he was boring as hell and it was hard to listen to him. Hank Brennan put on witnesses that I would never, ever put on, especially if I was representing the state or the Commonwealth, because and the lay witnesses as well, Ms. Deaver, who was clearly upset to be there.
Don't call her Deaver, it's Dever. Remember that? She got really upset when she was called Deaver. It's Dever. At least the other side can get my name right. I'm sorry, Yoli.
I think Deaver stuck in my head. Dever. And then you had Ms. McCabe, who basically misrepresented herself or lied to who she was with the FBI because I think she thought they were salesmen or whatever. Why lie? I mean, if salesmen come, I just tell them, no, I'm not interested.
Right. Exactly. Alexis, what, if anything, do you think about that question?
I mean, it's hard to say, but I have to agree. I think Lally did definitely prosecute a better case, just in the fact that I think he did a good job of elongating the trial so much by just like bloating it so much by adding so many unnecessary witnesses that it just completely confused the jury, where they're like, we don't even know what we're reviewing at this point because I don't even remember what happened throughout this case. Whereas Hank Brennan, I think, was just trying to be, I don't know, I guess like too creative, too sharp. And I think he put a lot of witnesses on there that he was completely out of control of. I think he played a great defense attorney for Karen Reed's team. So, I mean, that was a great investment on the DA's office for that. But it was just, angry Deaver. That was probably my favorite testimony out of the entire trial.
I hate to bash Mr. Brennan. I agree with what all three of you said, because I think, as I've said before, I know the man. I know a lot of people in Greater Boston can say the same thing. I've sat in the room with the guy. I've talked to the guy. I've called the guy and asked him for advice, which he's given me over the years. So I want to switch subjects for just a second. We'll come back to the Q&A, but after the verdict, I had the opportunity to interview William Reed, Karen's father, and he said something. He gave me an answer to one of my questions that just really kind of shocked me.
I don't believe Karen Reed and Sandra Birchmore are outliers on the data point curve. So others may need the voice of reason, the voice of power from people like yourself and others who are very much richly informed about our court system and the system of justice. So please, even though we may go away, don't you go away.
And Mark, he mentioned a lot of the YouTubers that, we've all been talking to him and to you. And he mentioned you in particular as someone that has really helped to bring this whole case to the forefront. I have a question for you, Mark. And my first question before I open up the floor to the others is, I read a comment on someone else's channel, and I don't know who. I should credit whoever's channel this was on. Somebody commented that maybe one of the better bad rulings that Judge Kearney made was she kept you off the case. She wouldn't approve your petition pro hoc vice. And this commenter said maybe that was a good thing because you've been all over podcasters, YouTubers. You're on my friend Grace Curley's show on WRKO in Boston. So do you think maybe that bad ruling was a good ruling because you've been able to communicate so much?
I mean, I don't know. You're asking a lawyer who was on the precipice of being defense counsel in the case of the century. So, I mean, obviously, door A, door B, I'd rather be in the courtroom and doing that. Having said that, not subject to a gag order, then let's go. I'm not bashful about what I think here. And so that's fine if that's how it worked out. And if it added awareness, then so be it. I can tell you throughout this process and meeting many, many people, there's nobody, bar none, of anyone I've met who is more impressive and I like more than Bill Reed, who's become a good friend in all of this. And he is just the backbone of that family, very stoic, very supportive, just an incredible asset for someone to have as family support throughout 3.5 years of living hell. And I was just thrilled for him personally and his wife Janet and their whole family, Karen, obviously, when this came out the right way.
Yeah, he reached out to me. It wasn't the other way around. He reached out to me at some point and started, giving me some ideas, and he often would send me materials that were helpful. So, Yolie, you have any questions for Mr. Bederow?
No, I've watched Mr. Bederow in podcasts, so he probably doesn't know who I am. But I just have a small true crime channel, and I mainly follow the Koberger case. And I heard you say that isn't that a slam dunk? Well,
no.
Based on what you might see, it looks like it. Based on what you see on the surface, most people will say, "Oh, that creepy guy." And the poor girls that were hiding in the house, and the story is far removed from that. So,
yeah.
But anyway, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Bederow, and it's also nice to meet you, Alexasrewm.
Yeah, Alexis. It's nice to meet you too.
Alexis, your thoughts on Mr. Bederow not being allowed on the defense team, but here he is.
I know. I mean, I've like Yolie, I've been watching your coverage mainly on the young Jurks from last year, so kind of starstruck in a way.
No.
It's super nice to meet you.
Don't be that. Nice to meet you too, please.
No, I really appreciate just the commentary and a lot that I've learned over the last year from you, as well as just so many other creators and attorneys who have been just gracious enough to give your expertise, Andrew, as well too. But my question would be, I guess if you were permitted to be on Karen's team, who were you mostly looking forward to potentially cross-examining if you had that opportunity?
I mean, some of this was obviously discussed, and I don't want to get into too much detail about what would have done. I mean, there were some very interesting witnesses who would have been lined up for that purpose. I don't think it was 100% clear, but I know there was some discussion about this even last night on someone else's channel, someone who's a client, which I guess is the reason why, according to the court, they wouldn't let me on. But one of the interesting ones, I think, would have been Kerry Roberts. who was not cross-examined at all in the first trial. But there were some other very interesting people, but I don't want to get too much into that other than to say, given the other case and where those cases may be heading and who the witnesses in that case may be, there could be some overlap and a chance to cross-examine them.
Mm.
No, I know there's some guardrails around. I'm sorry, I know there's some guardrails around what you're able to say and what you're not able to say. I want to jump ahead. We can get back into the trial. I want to jump ahead to something that happened the night of the verdict. The verdict came down, and that very night, one of the big three networks, ABC, does a 2-hour special, in which, maybe they tried to ask a couple of hard questions. It seems to me they were trying to rehabilitate Michael Proctor. Is that the most bizarre thing, or one of the most bizarre things you've seen on TV?
I thought it was ridiculous. But, as if I were Mr. Proctor, I would not want to be giving interviews on 2020. I think that's kind of the most arrogant thing you could do, in my opinion.
Of all the people in the world that you can get that you can get to talk to, Mark Bederow is pretty close to the top of the list. I put William Reed on my list. I reached out to Karen; she's been kind of busy. But Howie Carr had the defense attorneys on right away. He had Alan Jackson on, and Alan Jackson was making statements like, "This is the most difficult case or the most challenging case I've ever tried." And before I come back to that, I was just shocked that ABC is huge. This is a little channel. We're growing, but we're still kind of little. If I was ABC, I don't think that Michael Proctor would be the first person that I would call. I'm a bad choice.
His interview was an embarrassment and just the complete poster child of everything that's wrong with this case and why he will be synonymous with what a disgrace this entire production was within days of John O'Keefe's death. I mean, to see him get up there and talk about, wishing death upon someone as a figure of speech, and not just someone, the primary suspect that he's investigating, and say it's just a figure of speech, it's just a jest. What's the big deal? There's nothing investigatively I would do different in this case. He needs much better public relations advice than he's getting. And, you heard a lot of this during Karen's trial about all these interviews, and, you've seen interviews from a lot of people that are interesting. You saw interviews with the Alberts and McCabe's last night. And, suffices to say that those clips will be demanded as well, as they may have some value in some upcoming trials as well. And God knows, what exists in there. We'll find out.
Well, anybody in the defense team, anybody at all in the defense team, just the three, I guess we only see two in this particular picture, but, I thought Howie Carr's interview with Attorney Jackson was just an incredibly good, and he had it right away. The next day, I guess it was, but still, I mean, a huge network that has the power to, they can get the president of the United States in a second. Politics aside, whoever the president is, they can go up and down the roster in the State Department or in Congress and get anyone. And I just thought it was a bad choice. I just thought it was. So what's next? Will the FBI follow up, Attorney Bederow?
Probably not. I mean, who knows, really? They don't really announce these things when they're investigating someone, if you have any experience in federal investigations. But the reality is, the reason why nothing will ever come with it is because the Justice Department investigates properly and not the way the Norfolk DA does. So even if they're looking into things, nothing will ever happen unless they're satisfied, not that they think somebody may have engaged in any kind of criminal or suspicious behavior. They won't even arrest and indict until they think it's locked down and going to survive scrutiny all the way into a jury verdict a year later. And the reality is, any chance of getting anyone else who might have been responsible for this was lost within the first 24 hours due to the pathetic investigation of two separate police agencies. You never see one agency conduct an investigation as poorly as occurred in this case. In this case, you had two back to back. The Canton police, that was the shot, and the chaser was the Massachusetts State Police right then and there, doing it even worse. So realistically, any chance to preserve any credible evidence to go after anyone was gone a long time ago.
Alexis, what do you think about that? What do you think is next? What do you think is going to happen in terms of, Karen's been found not guilty. Will there be an effort at any level, state, local, anywhere, to dig into it and find out, what did happen?
I mean, I think that's wishful thinking unless the O'Keefe family starts pressing for answers, which is totally up to them. I've always had sympathy for them because I think they've just been, in my opinion, been fed a lot of information, wrong information, from really manipulative and convincing people. And I think if they come to their own and they decide we want answers, we want to, maybe hire our own private investigator and do our own digging. I just don't see that really happening. I think it's wishful thinking, and I hope that justice for John O'Keefe actually does come, but I don't really see that happening. I think what's more likely is that Jen McCabe's going to come out with like a tell-all book and a movie deal of her own. And then we're going to hear more from her, and more from her and more from Kerry Roberts, and everybody's going to get a book deal and everybody's going to be on Dr. Phil. And I see that more being the realistic ending to, unfortunately, the story.
The reason why people like Jen McCabe will never get a book deal, although that I agree with you that could be something to try to do or be interesting, is because by the very definition of their own claims of what happened, they have nothing interesting to sell, because their information that they allegedly possess is like the three monkeys, they hear no, see no, feel no. I mean, they know nothing according to them. So there's nothing to sell. And the reality is nobody wants to hear and buy a book about, I was harassed by allegedly people and my life is miserable and unfair. And therefore, what can I tell you? I didn't make the Google search. If she made the Google search at 2:27 and wanted to tell a story about why that happened 4 minutes after a butt dial and this and that and all kinds of interesting things, she'd have a bestseller next week. Yeah. But with their current version, they're not that interesting.
I'm just a soccer mom.
I'll take it into the hypothetical, but how could a person like her write a book without perjuring themselves? I mean, she wouldn't even tell the FBI her real name when they started asking her questions. So who would even want to read that book? I don't get it. She had her 15 minutes of fame when she was on the stand for 2-3 days. So who wants to read anything more? What do you think about Jennifer McCabe going forward, Yoli?
I wouldn't put it past her to try to get a book deal. I don't, like Mark said, I don't know if anybody would be interested, but there are some people who might be interested. And again, she has nothing very interesting to say other than what I find the most crazy thing is that she said that she gave another person's name when the FBI came, or they weren't allowed to say FBI, they're allowed to say another law enforcement agency came. She gave a different name, Nicole, or I don't know, she gave somebody else's name. And then the reason was, I thought they were salesmen. And I just, that alone makes her look like, like not credible. I don't know why anybody would want to have a book by somebody who says that in this type of case.
No,
I thought. Go ahead. I was just gonna say, I thought her not providing her name to the FBI was actually the least interesting part of her bizarre interaction with the FBI, because after they left, they obviously knew she was Jen McCabe. It was her house. They knew what she looked. I mean, these are FBI agents. This is not the Michael Proctor, clown car going around doing an investigation. They knew what they were doing. They waited to see what would happen. She comes back, says, all right, I thought, remember, she gave her sister's name, by the way, which is also bizarre. But when she comes back, she says, I'll talk to you, but I need to go inside and according to her, brush her teeth. Now, if you believe that,
I almost
I
spit
have a
out my
bridge.
water.
Well, so what she does is she goes inside for 10 minutes. She comes out and they say, "What are you doing? Did you make any phone calls?" And she says, "Yeah, I made 2 phone calls," right? And what does she say? "I called my husband," which is totally normal. There's FBI agents here. I think anyone would give her a complete pass for calling your spouse when there's agents knocking on the door. I forget who she admitted the other one was, but it turns out she's calling John O'Keefe's mother, Brian Albert, Kerry Roberts, her husband, and I'm forgetting the other one because it doesn't even matter, I suppose, at this point. It's obvious what they're doing. There's a
They had to
panic
get their
going
story
on.
straight.
And have they come to you? What did you tell them? And she comes out and they say, "Did you make any phone calls?" And she says, "I made 2 phone calls." And it's her husband who later says, after the 1001 warnings, which is if federal agents warning you it's a federal crime under 18 USC 1001 to tell a materially false statement to a federal investigator during the course of investigation, she has to come clean and say these other calls that she makes. And then they say, "All right, we want to talk to you." And what does she do? Within 10 minutes, she terminates the interview and says, "I don't want to talk to you. In essence, I'm going to get a lawyer," which, by the way, I'm a lawyer. I would never fault anyone for doing that. But the reality is she was being sold by Brennan at this trial as somebody with nothing to hide, the most cooperative witness of all time, who cooperated with all kinds of law enforcement. Yeah, with Michael Proctor and the Canton police, who she knew personally, called over, went to visit their house, and did all those sort of things. But as soon as an unaffiliated, disinterested agency came in, ostensibly to ask her the same information about finding what happened to your friend John O'Keefe, what did she do? Her instinct was to lie, dissemble, and terminate the interview. So the idea that she was credible and cooperative is patently false.
Alexis, you have a grin on your face. Why? Tell us.
Well, I mean, yeah, I remember when that came out in her testimony that she made all those phone calls after being like, "Oh, I only called 2 people." And it really stuck out to me. I'm like, why would you call John O'Keefe's mother in that moment? It was just so bizarre to me. And also Brian Albert, because Brian Albert is your brother-in-law, not your sister.
Right.
Why wouldn't you call your sister over your brother-in-law? So that was just, I mean, everything about this case is bizarre, but that particularly. And then she backtracked it. She pulled a Kelly Beaver and was like, "Oh, I had a false memory about the number of calls I made. So let me phone up the FBI and let them know I also called all these other people because my husband's like, you can't lie to the FBI." So, I mean, it was just laugh out loud funny.
Her, by the way, forgetting the number of calls occurred in the span of 5 to 10 minutes.
Yep.
That she somehow forgot and remembered. I mean, obviously, a lie is a lie is a lie. She lied to the FBI. It's plain and simple. And when you do that, you surrender your right to be portrayed as nothing but a soccer mom concerned about helping any law enforcement solve what happened to my friend. It's just not true.
It's not true. It's dishonest. It's not true.
One of my takeaways from this case is, and I've heard people on other podcasts say, "Oh, well, this was corrupt in the past tense, and Massachusetts will learn from this, and we'll go away, and there'll be investigated." No. Massachusetts has always been corrupt. I was always surprised that people give Chicago this reputation. Don't forget that Boston elected Mayor Curley from a jail cell. When I first started paying attention to things in Massachusetts in the 1970s, 2 state senators were behind bars, DiCarlo and McKenzie, for taking kickbacks in the construction of a new UMass campus in Dorchester. There's the state police overtime scandal. The Massachusetts crime lab was so corrupt that the phoning up and just outright neglect to do proper drug tests in the Massachusetts crime lab was so bad that Netflix did a series on it, How to Fix a Drug Case. there's more. I mean, Mark, I heard you the other night talking, I think to Howie or someone, about the corrupt midget, the Senate President William Bulger, who was the brother of Whitey Bulger. And let's not even mention John Connolly, who was the one who gave Whitey the tip to get the hell out of town. We're coming for you. So, I mean, and I digress, but it's gone on and on and on. Just in those things have happened in my brief, historically significant period of time. So I don't think anybody's going to learn anything from this. I really don't. The corruption is so endemic. Now, am I going out and say that?
You have to wait and see. I mean, there's going to be an election in Norfolk County soon, and the reality is, what are the voters going to do with Michael Morrissey? I mean, at this point, I think if he had any professional dignity and just concern with the public trust in the crisis in that county, where there's no confidence in criminal justice, the most honorable thing for him to do would be resign yesterday. Okay. And if you're not going to do it yesterday, resign today. And if you won't resign today, resign tomorrow. I mean, that would be the biggest thing, which would show the public that there can be a restoration to having public trust in the system. I don't expect him to resign, but the question is, when he runs, there's people running against him. Will anybody do anything? And if they don't, and they're comfortable with the way cases like this are prosecuted, the way investigations like the Sandra Birchmore disgrace was investigated, then you deserve what you get. So, I mean, I think it's just a wait and see. It's really up to the people who live there.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, Mr. Morrissey's up for re-election in 2026. But I mean, I could go on and on about how deep it is. I mean, the current governor of Massachusetts was in the Attorney General's office when this case came about, and she really did nothing. And when it came out in the first trial that Michael Proctor had made those texts, she was asked, and she said almost nothing. She hid behind that, typical political BS. Oh, well, I don't talk about pending cases. Well, that case was over, and it was over for a long time. And Madam Governor, you said really little or nothing. You said really nothing. So I've only been watching Massachusetts for 50 years, but my observation is that it's as corrupt as it gets. So I guess before we get too cynical, talking about that crowd that was outside of the Norfolk County Superior Court in Dedham, I know a few people that were out there, but I interviewed a school teacher from Southern New Hampshire who drove all the way down there, and she was in the crowd that day as the verdict was read.
Andrew, it was amazing. I mean, the energy was wild. So when Karen walked in, we knew something, was going down. Everybody was super quiet, and with the signs and everything, I mean, that was so powerful. From where I was standing, all of a sudden a group of people, like to my right, to the back, yelled not guilty. So that kind of started a little bit, and then, different groups as they started getting it on their stream. And then all of a sudden, finally, I think when the last one was read, it just broke out into a huge roar, and everybody was just screaming and just looking at each other like we couldn't believe it.
And I asked her, what makes you do this? I mean, she's a school teacher, she has kids, she would go to these standouts, and she has a lot of friends in that movement. And so I will play the full interview at the very end of this episode. We'll play the full interview I did with her, and also my full interview with William Reed. I agree with you, Mark. He's an incredible guy. I wish I knew him better, but he was very helpful to me during this whole thing. I want to jump ahead. I cut some people out. I'm not the best at this, as you know, but you're all bear with me. Welcome back. I didn't mean to cut you guys out. But I want to ask everybody, panel and viewers, in the last few weeks of this trial, what were the most outrageous things? A, that Hank had hired Dr. La Posada himself and then cut her down. B, or two, that the Commonwealth expert Shanon Burgess lied about having a bachelor's degree, which he's been working on for 17 years. 3, Hank's cross-examination of key expert Dr. Rentschler about a ham sandwich. Or 4, ABC's bizarre Michael Proctor primetime interview. Let's start with you, Yoli. 1, 2, 3, or 4. or other can be your answer.
Well, I'll go with number 2. And also what's not on there is the tofu remark about the brink. That was that was one of the craziest things.
I forgot that. I've tried to like tofu my entire life. I was a vegetarian for 2.5 years, and I tried so hard to like it. Nuh-uh. I'm sorry. Alexis, 1, 2, 3, or 4?
It's gotta be 3. I mean, the ham sandwich, the irony of it all is that, a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. So I know how long it takes to eat a ham sandwich, 10, 15 minutes. And the funny part is as I was listening to the testimony, my wife was eating a ham sandwich. So I felt a personal kismet to the entire testimony. That was just insane.
Such a huge case that this is so much evidence, and these experts are brilliant people. Rensler's an engineer. He's a brilliant guy. So you ask him about a ham sandwich, and he asked follow-up questions too.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to eat the ham sandwich?
I know.
Okay.
I thought he was going to ask what kind of dressing you put on it too. I was very curious. I was very invested in the ham sandwich.
And we don't know whether it had mustard or mayo. We just don't know. Mark, 1, 2, 3, or 4?
The answer is 5, all of the above. I mean, the fact that we're having, as intelligent people after a 2 murder trials, even analyzing any of this is illustrative of just how pathetic and disgraceful this all is. Now, all kidding aside, I mean, it is a close call. I think the answer, I'm going to tell you why 1, 2, and 3 are close. The answer has to be 2, because there is a level of incompetence by a prosecutor, an experienced prosecutor, that is inexcusable when you use an expert like Burgess, whose entire purpose was to set up the data for them to theoretically show that this car accident had to have occurred at 12:31 or 12:32, depending on, the time variance when you choose to make it, when the data moves to help you, right in front of Brian Albert's house at a certain time, at a certain speed, at a certain triggering event, a certain key cycle, all that stuff. And the person you get to do this is the guy with all of the academic fraud. And is it any surprise that he also turns out to be the guy who didn't know the difference between bits and bytes? Now, look, I'm the last person to get into if you had asked me a month ago, what is a bit versus a byte? But I don't purport to be an expert in cellular data and whatnot. But when you do that for a living, a bit versus byte ought to be the difference between knowing is 3 or 4, which one's a bigger number. I mean, that ought to be open and shut. So you have the academic fraud, the problem with the bits and bytes, and then he makes all this data and he has the wrong day. He's 24 hours off. And you say, this again, it's like they're all pulling up in the clown car. What are you doing? And nobody picks this up. Then you find out, or you find out before, that this is the same guy who we're told on his own in the middle of trial, on his own, which, we've all dealt with expert witnesses. This never happens. Never, ever, ever does an expert mid-trial say, let me do some experiments and then I'll tell the lawyer, hey, guess what? I was wrong. Sorry. You want to report? He comes up with that. So that, to me, is so inexcusable. And when you saw Brennan do a direct examination of him, what did he skip when he was building up his credentials? He tap danced through the minefield and asked him about every credential that he allegedly had except his educational background. That tells you a lot. Now,
where was the grave concern? I didn't hear anybody from the bench. I didn't hear that.
The part about La Posada and hiring herself. Look, again, if you were dealing, in my view, with an ethical prosecutor's office, this is what happens. By all accounts, in Massachusetts, Dr. La Posada is well known and well respected. Never mind the station fire stuff. She handled that expertly, by the way. In fact, he made her more sympathetic, not less. But the reality is, in a normal DA's office, this is what would happen when you get the defense notice of we intend to use this expert. Brennan would say to Lally and McLaughlin or Morrissey or whoever and say, well, shit, they're using this expert who I know real well, and I have hired her in a privileged and confidential relationship in the past. And you know what? I know about the alleged warts, the station fire, allegedly, the backlog of autopsies, and you have to assume that he prepped her on how to deal with that as his witness previously. And in that situation, what a prosecutor should have said was, I'm going to create an ethical screen around her. Okay. So Lally, guess what? She's yours. And I'm going to step aside and you cross her on anything you want. And it's as if we're supposed to believe that when he says, I'm not going to do that, there was a potential conflict there. Now, it turned out not to matter because she gave him nothing on cross. I think, as I said to someone else, she basically stole his soul, pulled it out,
Yep.
and you could just see everything go downhill from there. But this is just another example of how they do things wrong in Norfolk County and just assume it's normal.
Yeah, Mr. Brennan, it makes no difference how fast the car was going because it didn't hit her. There was no collision. She turned that around so well.
She did. And the other thing is, she was not pleased with this. I mean, she was her sass, or her, the only word I can come up with, pissiness, and I mean that in the best light. I mean that in a good way, was evident right away when he said good afternoon and she says, well, it's actually morning. And then later on, that was just a warm-up. Later on, when he's kind of mumbling and she says, well, I can't understand you because you have your hand over your mouth. Listen, there's something there. Okay, she was offended by this and him coming after her to some extent. And then the last thing is just Rentschler. If somebody is experienced, as Brennan thinks, that these ARCA witnesses that he knows were hired by the FBI, forget what the jury knows. He knows they were hired months before these guys ever even heard of Karen Reed or her lawyers, and that they were given limited information and just said, give me a scientific opinion. And he's going to argue that they're biased because you had a sandwich for 10 minutes, you used Signal, and you deleted a few text messages. You've lost the plot, my guy, if you think that that's effective cross-examination of this guy who was absolutely devastating to your case. So 15 minutes later, I think the answer is 5, all of the above, but then it's a close call between 1, 2, and 3. But I have to come out with 2. That is just one of the cardinal sins of trial practice, how you would affirmatively hire an expert with who, an expert, his credibility is all he has. His academic integrity is all he has. And Brennan knew this was a problem. And that he knew because he specifically avoided asking about it. And that speaks poorly of Brennan. It speaks poorly of Aperture. It speaks poorly of this entire fiasco of a prosecution.
Yeah, it sure does. So we had viewer comments, but we're running late. So I'm going to skip the viewer comments and ask you, Alexis, so what are your closing thoughts here based on what Mr. Bederow just told us?
Well, you have Tully, driving around and also flying around the country, like visiting experts, giving interviews, and also playing chauffeur to expert witnesses. So it was just the whole thing about how critical Hank Brennan was to the ARCA witnesses was just, again, laughable. In terms of La Posada, I think she was one of the strongest witnesses for the defense personally, and I think she definitely held her own against Brennan, whereas I think some of the other defense experts, Dr. Marie Russell, love her, think she's amazing. I think she did get a little rattled by him at times, but she definitely, I think, helped really elevate the testimony of Dr. Rentschler in the end to just prove that, yeah, he was not hit by a car. Like, I don't believe this. And I think that just speaks to the credibility and believability for the jurors in my mind. I know if I was sitting on the jury and I have an expert on there, multiple experts saying, John O'Keefe, I don't think John O'Keefe was hit by a car, I'm going to tend to believe them over the guy who's coloring himself with, 50 shades of blue. So
Yeah, I agree. Yoli, your closing thoughts.
Well, I agree with Mr. Bederow regarding number 2, and then the other 1 and 3 being close calls. But number 2 is really, you just don't do that. I mean, I do medical malpractice. I deal with experts all the time. I would never, never put an expert on the stand who I knew had lied on his CV before. That's just, I mean, if you didn't know and it's a shock, well, then you can understand, but you should know. I mean, you shouldn't even go up there not knowing. You should have all that information with you when you're there. And I would never put somebody on that. When people say that Karen Fraud had this, or Karen Reed had this innocence fraud campaign, that it was a fraud on the court, they're projecting, because the real fraud on the court was having this expert lie or having people be dishonest about what they saw or what, the dishonesty that kind of went through the whole prosecution's case. It was just a stream of little dishonesties and some big dishonesties. And it's not right. I mean, I'm flabbergasted.
And credibility is always an issue with every witness from the time they take the stand to the time they walk off. That's the big issue. And if you don't have that, you not only does the witness lose credibility, but the attorney that put them on the stand loses credibility if it looks like they're in on it. One of the more, Mark, you had mentioned William Reed before and how he was such a great guy for you to get to know. I played just one clip of my interview. So right now I want to play my whole interview with William Reed because I think people deserve to hear what he had to say. I'm with Karen's father, William Reed. William, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. The first question, just so obvious, but I have to ask you, at the end of the trial, with your daughter being acquitted, how are you feeling?
Just elated, relieved, just so thankful to our Supreme Being, Almighty God, for our prayers being answered. Trust me, it's been a long 3.5 years, a fight against an opponent that has infinite resources with their ability to generate revenues, resources through taxes. And so we're just so blessed to be free of this. It's been a long 3.5 years.
After all of this time and all of the issues, I mean, a first trial and a second trial that lasted 8 weeks, of all of the many, many, many things and the reasonable doubt, I heard you talking elsewhere about the distinction between your observations of the tail light on January 29th, 2022, and then what was shown the jury. Was that the biggest thing that just struck you, or what was the biggest thing that struck you about the whole trial?
Well, it was a big thing, and it was the first thing that came to my attention, because when I retrieved Karen from the hospital that morning, she wanted to go back and express condolences to the children and see them. So we went back to One Meadows, and then I drove her home from there in her vehicle. And it was there that I saw the taillight. And I would not have driven that, particularly in a blizzard, if that taillight was obliterated, not essentially functional as a working taillight with a backup apparatus and with, a stop signal. So, yeah. And then when you see how it looked, dismantled, so to speak, in the Sally Port, it's 1 and 1 failing to equal 2, and that is just one of the many things.
I'm sure it was. Did you see the ABC special with Michael Proctor that was on television?
I did not. We were with the team last evening at a Boston eatery, and so all of the lawyers were there with their significant others and family, and in a private function room. And I know it was on, but no, I did not witness it.
It's probably just as well that you didn't see it. It was almost, they did ask him, how can you justify saying this, or how can you justify saying that? But what would your impression be that a major television network, at least in the old days, it was one of the big 3 influencers, not so much anymore. What is your response to the fact that they chose the day that your daughter was acquitted to interview Michael Proctor, of all people, to maybe rehabilitate him?
Well, I don't know if you really can rehabilitate him. He was fired on March 19th for bias, specifically in this case, the Karen Reed case. And, when you're fired from the Massachusetts State Police, it's usually for cause. And so it's difficult to, resuscitate life, in that situation, particularly, if you're trying to bring him back in law enforcement. So I didn't see it. I don't plan on watching it. In terms of the network's decision to interview him and air that on that particular day at that particular time, that's certainly their choice.
Okay. You had an advantage, obviously, over the rest of us that were out here in the world. I was working and just watching the trial as much as I could on YouTube. You were able to look into the eyes of the jury and see the jury. And I know Karen in the past has said that she felt comfortable with the jury because she helped us select the jury. Was there ever a time when you looked into the faces of the jurors and were concerned or worried about what they were thinking and what the result would be?
I can't say that. I never, I suppose from the first trial, you try to gauge a juror or two or three, how are they reacting to the prosecution's direct or the cross by the defense? Are they given any, signals? Are you seeing any type of facial movement that would give you a sense as to whether they're finding that testimony creditable or questionable? So I suppose the thing that kind of made me feel good was, you figure 12 weeks, maybe I forget how many weeks, 2.5 months solidly for sure, and countless sidebars, and we didn't lose one juror.
Yeah, that was surprising to me too. Yeah.
And so I think that underlies the interest in this case. And I think the interest is very deep and it's widespread, broad in scope. And I think the fact that these jurors, appreciate so much their service to the nation and to the American system of justice.
You just mentioned that they were doing a service to the nation. I was going to ask you another question about the jury, but are you surprised that your daughter's case got international attention? We, on our podcast, we had comments from all 50 states, Guam and Puerto Rico, and we have received comments and questions from our viewers in 72 different countries. Did that surprise you that the case got that much attention?
There once was a time early in 2022 when it was just my immediate family with David Yannetti prior to Alan Jackson joining in August of 2022. And we could not get any traction. Within the Reed household, we firmly believed Karen Reed was factually innocent. I saw the taillight. Karen saw the taillight. We knew what time the vehicle was seized, despite all of the attempts to say that it was seized later in the day so as to provide cover for when it arrived back at the Sally Port. But we still could not get traction. We were looking for traction in mainstream media, the broadcast media. And now when you look at it today, it's a case that has been highlighted by so many different aspects. You've got a relatively young woman, a professional woman, being accused of a serious crime, and her boyfriend, a Boston police officer, dead, found on the home of another Boston police officer. And you have questions about the integrity of law enforcement, both at the state level as well as at the local level. And then you bring in an Alan Jackson fighting for the cause, and you see Karen fighting for the cause and speaking on behalf of so many women who they themselves at one time or another at the very benign end of the spectrum might have been passed over on a promotion, on a jobs, only because they had, childbearing age. And then many of them may have felt as Karen certainly did, dehumanize, objectified, victimize. And I've met hundreds and hundreds of women at various fundraisers, standouts, outside of court. And it's just heartwarming. And I think that was I'd say to the women, you're not only the ignition, you're not only the engine, you're the transmission of this movement. And with deference to all of the gentlemen who are there also in support, I said, they're the tires, but it's the women who for centuries or decades may have felt, not respected. I think that has been the undercurrent, and it continues to be.
Wow, that's major. That's major. I don't know if you had a chance to see that one of the jurors has actually come out and given an interview to TMZ. And one of the things that I took away from the interview from the juror, and it was verified that it was in fact a juror, was they pretty much all were leaning towards not guilty. A couple were thinking guilty, but the distinction, the line that was drawn was some of them were saying Karen is innocent, and others were saying it's not that she's innocent. There's just a lot of reasonable doubt in this case. And does that surprise you that would have been said by one of the jurors as opposed to the juror in the previous case who said, "Yeah, she was there, he was there. We didn't hear that he went in the house, so we found it guilty." Does that strike you that the juror went into that depth?
I honestly would tell you no, because I think, as I'm sure you're aware, this case was put forward in a far different frame than trial one. And there was much less in terms of witness testimony. And yet it was based on the science. You saw more embellishment, amplification of the ARCA witnesses, the more elaborate testing that they did. You saw Dr. Russell continue to stand her ground on the wounds on the arm. And then you saw it in the first trial, Dr. Scotty Bello, the state's examiner, unable to conclude that John O'Keefe was struck by a vehicle, and she could not conclude the manner of death, undeterminable.
Right. That was striking.
And then the defense brings in the notable Dr. Elizabeth Laposado. I think I'm saying that name correctly.
No, you got it. You got it.
Former medical examiner, state of Rhode Island, and now a distinguished Brown University professor, very eloquently and very definitely saying, no, I do not see injuries consistent with a vehicle strike. And also, he didn't die from hypothermia. So many questions. And then on the prosecution side, I think there was a lot of weakness. Witnesses, their testimony being challenged, or at least question of what they may have said before the grand jurors or in the like, and now having to, walk that back a bit. So I'm not surprised. And then again, on March 19th, 12 days before the start of jury selection, Michael Proctor gets fired. And so that continues to be pervasive over all of the case. And you saw Alan Jackson's summation, and it was
incredible. Yeah.
Laced with Alan, even though he was not called. Michael Proctor could not escape this case. He infected it from the beginning.
Well, they tried to back away from him. Even Lieutenant Gallagher and Yuri Buchanan. Oh, he's not. He was the case agent, and they tried to back away from it, but they really were not successful in backing away from it. Two more questions. I promise, only two more questions, because I know this is a big day for you. Are you hopeful that now that your daughter Karen has been acquitted, are you hopeful that the FBI will step in and investigate this case, not only to get to the bottom of what happened, but also to look more into the investigation?
I'll always remain hopeful. If you ask me, am I optimistic? No, I'm not optimistic. So I'm hopeful, and you just can't tell what's going to happen down the road. Changing federal administration, if we get a new Norfolk DA, who knows? But my hunch is, evidence now 3.5 years after the fact, is missing, has possibly been destroyed. Who knows? No, I would not plan on that.
What now for Bill Reed and Janet Reed and Nathan Reed? But speak for yourself. Well, what now for you? Does life return to normal? What do you plan to do as time goes on now that the trial's thankfully in the rearview mirror, and this has now been a long and winding road?
Well, I don't know if my life will ever return to how I knew it to be, relatively obscure and being able to go here or there and dine in relative obscurity or leave Sunday church and just have a few greetings. But what I have seen, I've witnessed the worst in mankind over the last 3.5 years. But trust me, I've also viewed the best in humanity. The folks, learned individuals like yourself, Melanie Little, Mark Bederow, many of the content originators, Aiden Kearney, young Jurks, lawyer, and I know I'm leaving so many people out, Nurse Kim, people who have defended freedom, pushed forward in the face of power, and fought for justice. And when I say learned people, that's the important thing. These are people who are learned people, reasonable people, mature people, and able to digest information and come to an informed conclusion. And boy, that makes me feel good. I love what I've seen on social media. And I love the idea that, again, people like yourself and Mark Bederow have come out and spoken so forcefully and strongly. And it causes so many of us non-Juris Doctor trained individuals to sit, digest it all, and then with that new information, help to come to a more informed opinion on our part. So I think there's just a new chapter in my life to assist others. We were very, very, very blessed to put together this team on relatively modest dollars on my part.
It was a great team. Are you going to take a vacation now? It's early summer. You're planning to go away? Don't tell us where. Just tell us you're going to have a vacation. No.
Yeah, several folks, so many lovely folks have said, come here, come there. We have a cottage here. We have a resort here.
Do it.
I have a boat here. I have some issues. I can't swim, and I'm not sure I can steer a boat. But
come on now.
No, but I thank you, truly. I thank you for everything you've done in spreading the word, and certainly, as you say, it's flourished. All of the states. How many countries?
73. 73 countries have had people that have communicated with us, commented, and asked us questions, which I was mind-boggled because, as you know, we're a smaller channel. We're a growing channel, but 73 countries to contact us, I thought was big. And I want to thank you. During the trial, we were in communication. You called me one day. You were on the way to Market Basket, and we talked, and you've provided me with information. So I want to thank you both for communicating with me, but also giving us time for this interview on this big day. So thanks a lot.
And do me one favor. Continue to stay active.
Stay
active, because I don't believe Karen Reed and Sandra Birchmore are outliers on the data point curve. So others may need the voice of reason, the voice of power from people like yourself and others who are very much richly informed about our court system and the system of justice. So please, even though we may go away, don't you go away.
Well, don't ever hesitate to contact me again. Thank you very much.
All right. Best of luck. Thank you.
What a great guy. And to see that he, went through his daughter's case for all these years, just a remarkable guy. I had also spoken to Aaron and played just one clip during this show. So I would like to play my entire interview now with Aaron, who is an unabashed supporter of Karen Reed and who was outside the courthouse on the day that the verdict was read. I am with Aaron G., who was one of many, many, many people who were waiting outside the courthouse when the verdict came in. Aaron, those of us watching on YouTube couldn't believe it, but what was it like to be in that huge crowd when the verdict came down?
Andrew, it was amazing. I mean, the energy was wild. So when Karen walked in, we knew something, was going down. Everybody was super quiet, and with the signs and everything, I mean, that was so powerful. So we knew something was going on, and then the helicopters and everything. So then we heard that there was a verdict, and then found out that it came back. So then there was that confusion. So, I mean, just the emotions were just so intense.
Yeah, that was crazy. They announced there was a verdict. Then there wasn't a verdict. Then we still don't have a really clear explanation of that. And then there was a verdict. It was so loud that, I was just watching on YouTube with the rest of the nation and heard the crowd outside. So what was the crowd like? Were they orderly? Were they pushing each other around? What was it like to be there? Where exactly were you?
I was right across from, I was sort of diagonal from the courthouse steps. I was on the registry of deeds, basically. So when we found out that there was a verdict and they were getting everything situated, they closed down the streets. And then all of a sudden the police came in and they set up the barricades so that the crowd could go into the street. And everybody kind of followed very respectfully. I was a little nervous, that there was going to be a rush because, I mean, there were so many people. It was almost shoulder to shoulder. But everybody kind of just moved in accordingly, and we all just kind of waited, with holding our breath to see what was going to happen. It was.
And what was that moment?
And tears and all the stuff.
How did you hear? Did they have radios on? Was there a speaker system? How did you hear the news?
Well, it was interesting because everybody was streaming on different sites. So depending on the delay and everything. So from where I was standing, all of a sudden a group of people like to my right, to the back, yelled not guilty. So that kind of started a little bit. And then, different groups as they started getting it on their stream. And then all of a sudden, finally, I think when the last one was read, it just broke out into a huge roar, and everybody was just screaming and just looking at each other like we couldn't believe it.
You are one of many, 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 many FKR people, obviously. What motivates you? The first time I met you a long time ago, you were at a standout on a kind of windy day, standing out over one of the interstates. What motivates you to keep doing that?
So I got involved in this case because I had a DUI in the past, and it was on January 13th, and then this happened on the 29th. So I was home and I saw this happen in the news in real time, and I was like, that could have been me, and that's kind of what got me into it. And then when I heard Turtle Boy pick up the story and watched his, bringing the receipts and kind of uncovering all the unknown stuff that wasn't presented through the mainstream media, that's when I was like, this is wild. And, I was instantly hooked, and, the corruption is real.
What went through your mind at the moment? I mean, a lot of us had a lot of misgivings after the first trial when it was a mistrial, and then there was all the, legal, I hate to say mumbo jumbo, but there were the legal machinations regarding the witnesses that came out and said, well, no, we did vote not guilty, and we were unanimous on counts 1 and 3. So none of us knew what was going to happen. I was sitting on the edge of my chair. What went through your mind when it was NG on all 3 counts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ronnie from the first trial kind of terrified of a lot of people. And I recently was on a jury, and, just seeing it's interesting because you're with, a jury of your peers, and you don't know what everybody else's take is on it. And a lot of people were expecting a quick verdict on, what was it, Tuesday?
Friday. It was Friday the 13th when the closing arguments were made, and then it went to the jury for only 2 hours. But then they deliberated it Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday finally.
Yeah. Wednesday, being down there, I think we all thought it was going to come a lot sooner, before lunchtime. And then when lunchtime came and went, that's when I was getting a little nervous. What is taking them so long? I kind of thought after the questions that they had the day before, they were going to come in, boom, 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 lunchtime, be done. And then when it just kind of dragged through lunch, it was people were getting nervous. There was definitely an uncomfortable buzz, I guess is a good word.
What were your conversations? I saw that you posed with Vinnie Politan from from Court TV.
I spent a lot of time with Vinny. I mean, I was right next to him for most of the day. So that was pretty interesting.
What was your conversation like with him?
I just jumped in as, to get a quick selfie because, I didn't really watch Court TV, but I've, seen his take on it from the beginning to now. And it's just kind of interesting. I don't want to say he's come around, but it was interesting to see him holding a shirt that said Dream Team with all the members of Karen's face on it. So,
do you think a lot of the media was like that? I mean, I know a lot of the media, especially in Boston, and we're in the Boston media market. A lot of the Boston TV stations were, oh, she did it. Oh, she's guilty. Oh, at one point there was actually an incorrect report that there was ring camera footage of her backing into John O'Keefe. And so I don't know what you think, but I think that a lot of the media really missed the boat. They're just so used to, and I used to be a reporter, they're just so used to taking the news from the law enforcement, reporting it in a 90-second package, and then walking away from it and not really critically looking at it. But did you find that also, that a lot of people in the media kind of towards the end became, if not convinced as you are, that Karen was innocent, but at least being more objective?
Yeah, I think so. I've spoken to a few people in the media, and I've followed local media coverage my whole life, basically. But Channel 5, what is it, WCBV, I think one of their analysts was actually like Jen McCabe's lawyer. So, I mean, there throws a little bias in there to begin with.
Yeah, sure.
But NBC 10 Boston, I think, did a great job. They definitely started out, kind of, on the side. But I mean, Sue O'Connell I thought she covered it pretty well, really fair. And they did a whole special every night at 7:00 on it. And they were pretty, you could tell from the way some of them, ask questions and answer questions from the experts, which way they, are leaning, if they, whether
now,
or not
I'm sure you've heard that the O'Keefe family was very disappointed. They put out a statement, and they felt that it was, a wrongful verdict. And what was your response to that? And were there people in the crowd that were, not with you and the other FKR people?
Well, let me just say that, my heart does go out to that family. They've lost a lot, and they have gone through, so much because of this too. Yeah, with there being so many people there, I was a little nervous when they were walking in that people might yell out or boo or something, but the crowd was very respectful, and I was happy for that, because we don't, at the end of the day, this, movement, if that's what you want to call it, it's about getting justice for John. The people that really did this are still out there, and they're talking, and it's wild. And, I don't know. I hope something comes out and, figure out, get justice for John, his death shouldn't go.
Do you think the FBI will step in and do something? Or do you think anyone in law enforcement in Massachusetts will step in now and follow up and say, hey, Karen Reed has been found not guilty. We have to step up the investigation. Do you think that'll happen or not?
It seems like, no one really wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I did see that the woman who is going to run against Michael Morrissey put out a lengthy statement, talking about, his, people like to call it, I use so many quotes, his hostage video, and all the way that he has handled, this whole thing with this by hiring Hank Brennan. So that was interesting to see. I think a lot of people, are going to look at her, because at the end of the day, it comes down to Morrissey, and he needs to go. He's been comfortable in there for too long, and he's got too many skeletons in his closet, I think.
Now, let me ask you this. This is my last question, I promise, because you're
okay.
You're a busy person. My last question is: I interviewed William Reed the day after the verdict came down, and it was a very good interview. A really bright guy, obviously.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
He's been through an awful lot in the last couple of years. But his closing thought for me was, the people out on the podcast YouTubeville were very helpful to him and his daughter. And you know what he said to me that kind of struck me? I hadn't even thought of this. He said, keep it up. Don't stop. There's Sandra Birchmore. There are many other cases that are wending their way through the judicial system. He says, just because you're done with me, and I hope I'm not done with him. I hope I'm able to meet him later. We've talked a lot. He said, don't stop. Keep it up. Keep your eye on the justice system. So what about you? You've been involved in your FKR involvement movement. What about you? What do you do now? And your other friends that you've met through that?
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of connections and friendships that have been created through this movement. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, a lot of people I talk to are just going to take time to kind of reset, but Sandra Birchmore is huge to that's wild, and it's all intertwined. It's kind of a lot of the same players. Just wondering what Enrique Delgado Garcia, it's been how many months, and there's just so much. Why does his family not have an answer?
I know, you're absolutely right. And, I was planning to keep my eye on the ball on that case, and also Sandra Birchmore, as that wends its way through the federal courts. So I was planning to do that anyhow, but he motivated me to definitely do that, keep my eye on the ball on those and other cases, because there's just been so much. There's been so much in Massachusetts between the state police crime lab drug testing controversy, which made it up to Netflix in a documentary. Then the state police overtime controversy. There has just been, so much. Any parting words for me?
No, I just wanted to mention too one more thing. Recently, so I was a neighbor of Jeffrey Curley in Cambridge, who was murdered in 1997, and Charles Janes was supposed to be coming up for parole, but he wanted a delay, and it got delayed. So I'm just waiting to hear back from that, and hopefully, if I'm able to attend, I want to attend that, because that human being should never step foot outside of a building. I mean,
it's amazing.
It's amazing. One vote in Massachusetts. I mean, so that's my other next step too. But yeah, like you said, I mean, it doesn't end here. This was one of the most amazing experiences and things to be a part of. And like I said, I've made so many connections, and it doesn't stop here. I mean, people with power need to, be held accountable.
So you've learned a lot out of this Free Karen Reed episode, and it goes beyond. I mean, we're all happy, and I don't mind saying it. I know I get grief all the time in the comment section. How can you be objective? Well, I am objective, and what happened to Karen Reed is an outrage. But so for you, your efforts don't stop. I had no idea that you had been a neighbor of that individual in Cambridge. I remember that case. I was living in Arlington at the time, but. How outrageous that he even gets a parole hearing. It's kind of like, I hope it'll be like, Charles Manson, the California law required that he got a parole hearing every couple of years. And that idiot would, stand in front of the cameras and smile, and no judge ever granted him parole. Thank God. So this guy
can say he's reformed and he's done all this stuff in jail, but at the end of the day, you still did one of the most heinous things ever. And,
Agreed. 100% agreed. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And
thank you so
be
much.
Well.
Yes, absolutely. Free Karen Reed. Karen Reed is free. Sorry, Karen Reed is free. We ain't got no quit.
Okay. Strong person. And she's looking ahead to, watching other cases. So folks, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mark, any closing thoughts for us?
I'm glad this is over for Karen, her family, her lawyers, her supporters. It is a shame that they had to be subjected to this. Again, given the strength of the evidence, it's understandable to me in the early stages. first 24 hours that law enforcement would at least consider Karen a suspect, that's fine. But you can't have an investigation that just results in tunnel vision and just grabbing her a couple days later, ignoring everything else, and just digging in, and refusing to see that this is a weak case, that this was a flawed case, that it was a corrupted case. And they had so many chances to take an off ramp from subjecting everyone to this. And they had it when they got the ARCA materials, the other federal materials. They had it so many times. They had it after the first trial, and they didn't do it. And instead, they just doubled down, tripled down, spent all this, as we talked about earlier, taxpayer money for what? To lead the O'Keefe family on into going through this spectacle that was always designed to end in failure. And they have nothing to show for it. There's never going to be justice for John O'Keefe. But the people who blame Karen for that, they're misguided. You're looking in the wrong place. You need to be looking at the Norfolk DA's office, the Canton Police Department, and the Massachusetts State Police. That's why there'll never be justice for John O'Keefe.
It's sad. That's sad. Okay. I know I asked you before, Alexis. I know I asked you before, but once more, closing thoughts.
I think Alan Jackson said it best yesterday on Howie Carr. Just do better. Do better. The people of Massachusetts deserve better. And I mean, I know I don't live in Massachusetts myself, but this has opened my eyes open to what's going on in my local government. And I hope this never happens to anybody else ever again. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it has. And we're going to find out more and more cases that are similar to Karen Reed, Sandra Birchmore. But I hope it doesn't happen again anytime soon, and that they do learn from this. They do want to do better. And I'm just so elated for Karen Reed and her family. And I hope the O'Keefe family can find eventually some sort of peace.
Alexis, you actually did a episode on the interview that Alan Jackson did with Howie, and I'll link that down in the description section down below. And I highly recommend that because I know Howie is is syndicated throughout the country, but he's really a Boston boy. He's a Boston. He was born in Maine, but he's part of the Somerville gang, I'll say. Yoli, your closing thoughts.
I'm just, social media can be a detriment, but sometimes it can be a positive when it brings to light things that wouldn't normally be brought to light. So I'm just glad that I learned about this case because I was so focused on the Koberger case. But I'm glad I learned about this case, and I'm glad I was able to talk about it. And I'm glad for Karen Reed, for anybody who's ever been, just restrained that way, to not be able to live your life with this for years, with this thing hanging over you and having to, worry about it, when in reality, she should not have been having to worry about anything. And it's a very sad situation. And I hope that Mr. O'Keefe's family finds peace. And, I don't know what's going to happen with the civil case, the wrongful death case against Karen Reed, but I hope that the family finds peace, and, that they come to the understanding that if they do want to find out what happened, they should push the investigators.
Thank you. Thank you all, Mark, Alexis, Yoli. Thank you so much for your time. I'll put links to all of your channels and recent episodes down below. And with that, time to go to the grocery store. Whether you are in the grocery store, the gas station, or anywhere else, please remember to be kind to people. You don't know what they're going through. And the same goes for our comment section. We want you to comment, but be nice, be kind, be positive if you can. And thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Have a good one.